Marcus Johnson was tired but happy as he walked through the doors of Westfield Community College. It was his first day of class after 8 long years in the Army. At 28, he was older than most students, but that did not bother him. He had a dream to get a business degree and open a gym to help other veterans like him. Marcus had seen a lot during his time in the Army. He had been to Afghanistan twice and earned 2 Purple Hearts for being hurt in battle. The scars on his left arm and the slight limp in his walk told stories of his sacrifice. But today was about looking forward, not back. He found his first class easily, English literature, with Professor Karen Mitchell. The room was almost full when he walked in, but he spotted an empty seat in the back row. Marcus sat down, his military training showing in his straight back and alert eyes. He took out his notebook and pen, ready to learn. Professor Mitchell walked in exactly at 9:00 a.m. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her sharp eyes scanned the room behind glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. "Welcome to English Literature 101, she said with a thin smile. "I am Professor Mitchell. In this class, we will study the great works of American and British writers." Marcus listened carefully as she explained the class rules and the books they would read. He was excited to see Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison on the list. He had read it twice during his time overseas and felt a deep connection to it. When Professor Mitchell asked if anyone had read any of the books on the list before, Marcus raised his hand. He noticed how her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw him. "Yes, in the back," she said, not using his name though he had written it on the sign-in sheet. "I've read Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison," Marcus said clearly. "It really spoke to me, especially during my time in the military." Professor Mitchell's smile did not reach her eyes. "How interesting. I'm sure your understanding of such a complex work must be quite basic." A few students turned to look at Marcus with surprise. The comment was clearly rude, but Marcus just nodded politely. He had dealt with much worse than an unfriendly teacher. As the class went on, Marcus noticed that Professor Mitchell called on every student who raised their hand, except him. When he finally spoke up to answer a question about the reading assignment, she cut him off mid-sentence. "That's not quite right," she said, though Marcus was sure his answer was correct. Perhaps military training doesn't prepare one for literary analysis. This time, the whole class fell silent. The comment was too obviously mean to ignore. A few students looked at Marcus with sympathy in their eyes. Marcus took a deep breath. In the Army, he had learned to choose his battles wisely. This was not the time or place to fight back. He would prove himself through his work instead. After class, a young woman with braided hair approached him. "Hey, I'm Tasha," she said. "Don't mind Professor Mitchell. She's like that with students she sees as different." "Thanks," Marcus said with a small smile. "I face tougher challenges than one difficult teacher." "Well, if you need notes or anything, let me know," Tasha offered. "A bunch of us study in the library on Thursdays." As Marcus walked to his next class, he thought about Professor Mitchell's behavior. He wondered if it was because he was older, because he was a veteran, or because he was black. Maybe it was all three. Whatever the reason, he was determined not to let her stop him from getting his education. What Marcus didn't know was that this was just the beginning. Professor Mitchell's treatment would get much worse before it got better. But when it did, the whole college would learn a powerful lesson about respect, dignity, and the quiet strength of a man who had already fought for his country and wasn't afraid to stand up for himself. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus tried his best in Professor Mitchell's class. He did all the reading, wrote careful notes, and finished his first paper 2 days early. He spent extra time on it, making sure every word was perfect. The paper was about Invisible Man and how it connected to his own life. When papers were returned the following Monday, Marcus was shocked to see a C on his work. He looked through the pages and saw very few comments. There was just a short note at the end. "Your understanding lacks depth. See me after class." Other students were comparing grades. Tasha leaned over and whispered, "What did you get?" See, Marcus said quietly. Tasha's eyes went wide. That's crazy. Can I see it? She looked through his paper quickly. Marcus, this is really good. I got a B+ and yours is better than mine. After class, Marcus waited until everyone left. He approached Professor Mitchell's desk with his paper in hand. You wanted to see me about my paper? He asked politely. Professor Mitchell looked up at him over her glasses. Yes, Mr. Johnson. Your work shows a very personal interpretation of Ellison's novel. This is a literature class, not a therapy session. Marcus took a deep breath. I thought connecting literature to personal experience was part of understanding it better. Perhaps for elementary students, she said with a cold smile. College-level analysis requires more objective thinking. Your military experience seems to have given you a rather simplistic worldview. Marcus felt his face grow warm. This wasn't fair. And they both knew it. Professor Mitchell, could you please point out specific problems with my analysis? I'd like to improve. She sighed as if he was wasting her time. Your grammar is acceptable, likely due to basic military report writing. But your understanding of racial themes is surprisingly underdeveloped, given your background. Now Marcus was sure this was about more than his writing. She was judging him for being black, for being a veteran, or both. Still, he kept his voice steady. I'd appreciate more specific feedback for my next paper, he said. I suggest you visit the writing center, she replied, turning away from him. They can help students who struggle with academic writing. As Marcus walked out of the classroom, he saw Tasha waiting in the hallway. Several other students were with her. Was she just as bad one-on-one? Tasha asked. Marcus nodded. Worse, actually. A tall student named David spoke up. She's been doing this for years. Last semester, she failed as single mom because she had to miss a class when her kid was sick. And did you see how she treated Liang when he asked for clarification because English isn't his first language? Another student added. Marcus listened as they shared stories about Professor Mitchell's behavior. It wasn't just him. She seemed to target anyone who didn't fit her idea of a proper college student. We should report her, Tasha suggested. On what grounds? David asked. She's careful. She never says anything that's openly racist or discriminatory. It's all in how she treats people, how she grades unfairly. Marcus thought about this problem like he would a military mission. They needed evidence. They needed a plan. Maybe we should document everything, he suggested. Keep copies of all our papers. Record the differences in how she grades different students. The group looked at him with new respect. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about standing up for fair treatment for everyone. There's a study group Thursday at the library, Tasha reminded him. We can talk more then. As Marcus walked to his next class, he felt something he hadn't felt since leaving the Army, the sense of being part of a team with a mission. Professor Mitchell might think he was just a simple soldier, but she was about to learn that military training taught more than just following orders. It taught leadership, strategy, and how to fight for what was right. What Marcus didn't know was that the worst of Professor Mitchell's behavior was yet to come, and it would happen in front of the entire class. Thursday evening came, and Marcus found himself at a corner table in the college library with Tasha, David, and 4 other students from Professor Mitchell's class. They all brought their graded papers to compare. Look at this, said Liang, pointing to his paper with a B. She marked me down for unclear expression, but didn't say what was unclear. She gave me a C because I used examples from my own life, said Maria, a young woman whose parents had come from Mexico. But she praised Tyler for doing the same thing, and he got an A. Tyler, a white student with blonde hair, nodded. I feel bad about it. My paper wasn't better than yours. Marcus listened carefully. A pattern was forming. Students of color, older students, and those who spoke English as a second language were getting lower grades for the same quality work. We need to be smart about this, Marcus said, thinking back to his military training. If we just complain without proof, it will be our word against hers. I've been recording the classes, Tasha admitted, showing her phone. I always record lectures to listen again later. I have 3 classes where she clearly treats Marcus differently. That's good, Marcus said, but we also need to show the pattern in grading. They spent 2 hours organizing their evidence. They made copies of all their papers and created a chart showing the patterns in Professor Mitchell's grading. Students with similar writing styles got very different grades based on who they were, not what they wrote. Now what? David asked. Do we take this to the dean? Marcus shook his head. Not yet. We need one more thing. To give her a chance to explain herself. That makes our case stronger. The group agreed that Marcus would speak to Professor Mitchell again, with Tasha nearby recording in case things went badly. The next day after class, Marcus approached Professor Mitchell's desk again. Tasha pretended to organize her backpack nearby. Professor Mitchell, I've been reviewing my paper and comparing it with feedback other students received. Marcus began politely. I'm concerned that your grading might be influenced by factors other than the quality of our work. Professor Mitchell's face turned cold. Are you accusing me of something, Mr. Johnson? I'm asking for fair treatment, Marcus said calmly. Several of us have noticed patterns that suggest bias in your grading. Professor Mitchell stood up, her voice rising. How dare you? 20 years I've been teaching, and now some soldier thinks he can tell me how to do my job. My military service taught me about fairness and respect, Marcus replied, still keeping his voice even. All I'm asking is that you grade my work on its merits. Your kind always wants special treatment, she snapped. Then, seeming to realize what she'd said, she quickly added, students these days expect everything to be easy. My kind, Marcus repeated quietly. Do you mean veterans, black students, or older students? Professor Mitchell gathered her papers quickly. This conversation is over. If you have complaints about my teaching, take them through proper channels. As she stormed out, Tasha approached Marcus, her phone in hand. I got it all, she whispered, including the your kind comment. That night, the group met again. When they heard the recording, they knew they had what they needed. They decided to go to the dean the next day. What they didn't know was that Professor Mitchell had already gone to the dean herself, claiming that Marcus was threatening and disrespectful. She had played the card of a frightened older woman facing an intimidating male student with military training. The stage was set for a showdown that would change everything at Westfield Community College. But Professor Mitchell had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated just how prepared Marcus and his friends would be, and how many allies they had already made across campus. The next morning, Marcus was surprised to find an email from Dean Williams asking him to come to her office at 10 a.m. He hadn't even filed a complaint yet. This meant Professor Mitchell had already spoken to the dean. Marcus called Tasha right away. Professor Mitchell went to the dean first, he told her. That's not fair, Tasha said. What are you going to do? I'm going to the meeting, Marcus said calmly. But I need you and the others to gather all our evidence and be ready to come if I call you. Marcus dressed neatly in a button-up shirt and khaki pants. He arrived at the dean's office 5 minutes early, just as his military training had taught him. Dean Williams was a serious-looking woman with short gray hair. She asked Marcus to sit down across from her desk. Mr. Johnson, she began, Professor Mitchell came to me yesterday with some concerning claims. She says you've been disruptive in class and made her feel threatened during a private meeting. Marcus wasn't surprised, but it still hurt to hear these lies. Dean Williams, I respect this college and all my teachers. I've never been disruptive or threatening. Professor Mitchell says your military background makes you aggressive when challenged, the dean continued. She says you couldn't accept criticism of your work. Marcus took a deep breath. Dean Williams, I have evidence that Professor Mitchell grades unfairly and treats certain students differently based on race, age, and background. The dean raised her eyebrows. That's a serious claim, Mr. Johnson. Yes, it is, Marcus agreed, and I don't make it lightly. My military service taught me to respect chain of command, but also to stand up against injustice. He took out his phone. With your permission, I'd like to play a recording from my last meeting with Professor Mitchell. The dean nodded, and Marcus played the recording. The professor's voice was clear. Your kind always wants special treatment. The dean's face showed shock when she heard it. There's more, Marcus said. My classmates and I have collected evidence showing patterns in her grading. Students of color, older students, and non-native English speakers consistently receive lower grades for the same quality work. I'll need to see all of this evidence, Dean Williams said. My classmates are waiting in the library with everything we've gathered, Marcus replied. I can call them now. The dean studied Marcus for a moment. Before I meet with them, I want to ask you something. What do you want from this, Mr. Johnson? Marcus thought carefully before answering. I want fair treatment for all students. I don't want Professor Mitchell fired. I think she needs training on bias and fair grading. The dean seemed surprised by his answer. That's very measured, considering how you've been treated. In the Army, I learned that most problems come from lack of training, not bad intentions, Marcus explained. Professor Mitchell might not even realize her bias. Dean Williams nodded slowly. Call your classmates. I want to see everything. 30 minutes later, Tasha, David, and the others arrived with their evidence. They spread papers across the dean's conference table, showing the clear patterns in grading. Tasha played more recordings where Professor Mitchell treated students differently based on who they were, not what they said. By the end of the meeting, Dean Williams looked troubled. Thank you all for bringing this forward properly with evidence. I need to meet with the department chair and Professor Mitchell, but I assure you this will be addressed. As they left the dean's office, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had been heard. But the battle wasn't over yet. Professor Mitchell wouldn't give up easily, and her next attack would come in front of the entire class. What Marcus didn't know was that Professor Mitchell was planning something that would backfire on her in the worst possible way. 2 days passed with no word from the dean. Marcus and his friends waited nervously to see what would happen. They still had to attend Professor Mitchell's class, which made things very uncomfortable. On Thursday morning, Marcus walked into the classroom and felt all eyes turned to him. Professor Mitchell stood at the front, a tight smile on her face. He could tell something was wrong. Today, Professor Mitchell announced as soon as everyone was seated, we're going to discuss academic standards and why they matter. She walked around the room, handing out papers. These are examples of proper college-level writing. I want you all to see what real academic work looks like. When she reached Marcus, she dropped the paper on his desk with a cold look. Marcus looked down and felt his stomach drop. It was his own paper about Invisible Man, but with red marks all over it, pointing out supposed errors. At the top, she had written, Example of substandard work. The room was silent. Everyone understood what was happening. Professor Mitchell was using Marcus's paper to shame him in front of the class. Let's examine this paper, Professor Mitchell said, walking back to the front. The author tries to connect Ellison's work to his personal experiences, which shows a fundamental misunderstanding of literary analysis. Marcus sat very still. In the Army, he had learned to stay calm under fire. This was just another kind of attack. The writer claims military service gives him special insight. Professor Mitchell continued, not saying Marcus's name, but making it obvious. But real academic work requires years of study, not just life experience. Tasha raised her hand. Professor Mitchell, isn't it normal to connect literature to our own lives? You praised Tyler's paper for doing exactly that. Professor Mitchell's smile tightened. That was a very different situation. How was it different? David asked without raising his hand. Tyler's connections were relevant to the themes of the book, Professor Mitchell said quickly. So are Marcus's. Maria spoke up. His paper talks about feeling invisible both as a black man and as a veteran returning to civilian life. That's exactly what Ellison's book is about. Professor Mitchell's face turned red. I am the professor here. I decide what is relevant. The classroom was tense. More students were starting to speak up now. You gave me an A for writing about my grandmother's stories, said a white student named Amy. How is that different from Marcus writing about his military experience? Professor Mitchell slammed her hand on the desk. Enough. This is my classroom, and I will not be questioned by students who barely understand the basics of literature. Then she turned to Marcus, who had remained silent through all of this. And you've turned my students against me with your complaints to the dean. 20 years of teaching, and now my reputation is being ruined by someone who probably only got into college because of special programs for veterans. The room fell completely silent. Even Professor Mitchell seemed shocked by what she had just said. Marcus finally stood up. His voice was calm and clear. Professor Mitchell, I earned my place here just like everyone else. My GPA for my first semester was 3.9. I worked hard for that while dealing with injuries from my service and the challenges of returning to civilian life. He picked up his marked paper. This isn't about my writing. This is about you not seeing me as a real student because of who I am. Just then, the classroom door opened. Dean Williams stood there with a serious expression. Professor Mitchell, I need to speak with you immediately. The whole class watched as Professor Mitchell gathered her things with shaking hands. As she walked out, Dean Williams turned to the students. Class is dismissed for today. We'll have a substitute for your next session. As Professor Mitchell left with the dean, the students burst into applause. Marcus sat down, feeling both relieved and sad. He hadn't wanted things to end this way, but Professor Mitchell had left no choice when she attacked him in front of everyone. What Marcus didn't know was that this public meltdown would lead to much bigger changes at the college than he ever expected. After class, students gathered around Marcus in the hallway. Everyone was talking at once about what had just happened. Did you see the dean's face? Tasha said. She looked so angry. Professor Mitchell really lost it this time, David added. She can't deny anything now. Marcus felt a mix of emotions. He was glad the truth was finally out, but he took no joy in seeing Professor Mitchell's public breakdown. I wonder what will happen next, he said. Later that afternoon, Marcus received another email from Dean Williams asking him to come to her office the next morning at 9 a.m. He wondered if he was in trouble for causing such a scene, even though he had stayed calm. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep well. He kept thinking about Professor Mitchell's words and the look on her face when she realized what she had said. He thought about his time in the Army, where he had served with people from all backgrounds who became like family. Why couldn't the college be more like that? The next morning, Marcus arrived at the dean's office right on time. To his surprise, Dr. Thompson, the head of the English department, was there too. Please sit down, Mr. Johnson, Dean Williams said. Her voice was much kinder than before. First, I want to apologize to you. Marcus hadn't expected that. Apologize? Yes, she said. I should have taken your concerns more seriously from the start. When Professor Mitchell came to me with her complaints, I should have looked deeper. Dr. Thompson nodded. We've reviewed all the evidence your group collected, plus the recordings from yesterday's class. Professor Mitchell's behavior was completely unacceptable. What's going to happen to her? Marcus asked. Dean Williams sighed. Professor Mitchell has been placed on leave for the rest of the semester. She'll need to complete bias training before she can return to teaching, and even then, she'll be closely supervised. We're also reviewing all her recent grades, Dr. Thompson added. Any student who received an unfair grade will have their work regraded by another professor. Marcus nodded. This seemed fair. Thank you for taking this seriously. Actually, we should be thanking you, the dean said. Your way of handling this has shown us bigger problems at our college. You gathered evidence, you stayed respectful, and you focused on making things better rather than just punishing Professor Mitchell. That's how we handled problems in my unit, Marcus explained. Focus on fixing the system, not just blaming people. Dr. Thompson smiled. We need more of that thinking here. In fact, we'd like to ask for your help." "My help?" Marcus was surprised. "Yes," Dean Williams said. "We're forming a new student experience committee to look at how we can make sure all students are treated fairly. We'd like you to be one of the student representatives." Marcus didn't know what to say. He had just wanted to be treated fairly in class, and now he was being asked to help change the whole college. "Your military experience gave you leadership skills and a unique perspective," Dr. Thompson continued. "Plus, you've shown you can stand up for what's right in a respectful way." Marcus thought about it. This could help other students who might face the same problems he did. "I would be honored to help," he said. As he left the office, Marcus felt a new sense of purpose. His military training had prepared him for this in ways he hadn't expected. By staying calm, gathering evidence, and working as a team with his classmates, he had created real change. What Marcus didn't know was that his story was spreading across campus, inspiring other students to speak up about their experiences. And one person who heard about it would change Marcus's life in ways he never imagined. News of what happened with Professor Mitchell spread quickly across campus. Students in other classes began talking about their own experiences with unfair treatment. Marcus found himself stopped in hallways by people he didn't know, thanking him for speaking up. A week later, Marcus walked into his English literature class to find a new teacher. Dr. James Wilson was an older black man with gray hair and a friendly smile. He wore a navy blue blazer with a pin that Marcus recognized immediately. It was a military service pin. "Good morning, everyone," Dr. Wilson said. "I'll be your professor for the rest of the semester. I've reviewed your previous work and the course materials, so we should be able to continue smoothly." During class, Dr. Wilson led discussions that included everyone. He asked questions that made students think deeply, but he never made anyone feel stupid for their answers. When Marcus spoke about Invisible Man, Dr. Wilson nodded with real interest. "That's an excellent point about how Ellison explores visibility and power," Dr. Wilson said. "Your perspective adds something valuable to our discussion." After class, Dr. Wilson asked Marcus to stay for a moment. "Mr. Johnson, I heard about what happened with Professor Mitchell. I wanted to let you know that I served too. Army, 1985 to 1993. "Thank you for your service, sir," Marcus said automatically. Dr. Wilson smiled. "You too, son. When I came back and started college, I had a professor who couldn't see past my uniform either. That's why I became a teacher, to make sure other veterans had someone who understood them." Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Here was someone who truly understood his experience. "I also wanted to tell you that Professor Harrison from the business department heard about your plan to open a fitness center for veterans," Dr. Wilson continued. "She wants to talk to you about making it your main project for her entrepreneurship class next semester." "Really?" Marcus couldn't believe it. "That would be perfect." Dr. Wilson nodded. "Your actions have opened a lot of doors, son. People are paying attention to veterans' needs in a new way because of you." As Marcus walked across campus that afternoon, he got a text from Tasha. "Check your email. Big news about the committee." Marcus opened his email to find a message from Dean Williams. The first meeting of the Student Experience Committee was scheduled for next week. But there was more. The college president would be there, along with several important alumni who funded scholarships. "We want to discuss expanding support for diverse student populations," the email read. "Your insights will be especially valuable, Mr. Johnson." That evening, Marcus called his mother to tell her everything that had happened. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice warm. "You stood up for yourself without losing your dignity. That's exactly what your father would have done." Marcus's father had passed away while he was deployed overseas. He had been a civil rights activist in his youth, always fighting for fair treatment with calm determination. "I was just trying to get through my classes, Mom," Marcus said. "I never expected to start something this big." "Sometimes the biggest changes come from people who are just trying to do the right thing," his mother replied. "Your father always said that." As Marcus hung up the phone, he thought about how one unfair teacher had led to so many positive changes. The new committee, the support for veterans, the connections with professors who understood him. None of this would have happened if he had just stayed quiet. What Marcus didn't know was that at the upcoming committee meeting, he would meet someone who would offer him the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to make his dream of helping other veterans come true much sooner than he had ever imagined. The day of the Student Experience Committee meeting arrived. Marcus wore his best clothes, a dark blue button-up shirt, khaki pants, and the one tie he owned. He arrived 15 minutes early and found the conference room in the administration building. Inside, there was a long table with name cards placed at each seat. Marcus was surprised to see his name card between the dean and someone named Robert Thompson, CEO, Veterans First Foundation. People began to arrive. Tasha and 2 other students took their seats. Then came several professors, including Dr. Wilson. Dean Williams entered with a tall, gray-haired man in an expensive suit who must be the college president. And then came a black man about 60 years old, walking with a slight limp that Marcus recognized, the kind that came from an old combat injury. "You must be Marcus Johnson," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Robert Thompson. I've heard a lot about you." "It's an honor to meet you, sir," Marcus said, shaking his hand. "Army?" Robert asked, noticing the way Marcus stood. "Yes, sir. 8 years. 2 tours in Afghanistan." Robert nodded. "Marines, myself. Vietnam. Different wars, same challenges coming home." The meeting began with Dean Williams explaining the purpose of the committee. "We want to make sure all students feel welcomed and treated fairly at our college," she said. "Recent events have shown us that we have work to do." Then each member introduced themselves. When it was Marcus's turn, he spoke clearly about his military service, his goals for education, and his experience with Professor Mitchell. "I don't blame the college for what one professor did," Marcus said, "but I think we can all learn from it. In the military, we had clear standards that apply to everyone equally. Maybe colleges need something similar." Several people nodded, taking notes. Then Robert Thompson spoke up. "I'm here because I founded Veterans First after my own difficult return to civilian life. We help veterans with education, housing, and starting businesses. When Dean Williams told me about Marcus, I wanted to meet the young man who handled discrimination with such dignity and purpose." The committee discussed many ideas for improving student experiences. Marcus suggested a mentoring program pairing older students with new ones, especially those from different backgrounds than most professors. "Sometimes you just need someone who understands where you're coming from," he explained. After 2 hours of good discussion, the meeting ended. As people were leaving, Robert Thompson asked Marcus to stay. "I understand you want to open a fitness center for veterans," Robert said when they were alone. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "Physical training helped me deal with PTSD and adjust to civilian life. I want to create a place where veterans can rebuild their strength and find community." Robert smiled. Veterans First has a grant program for exactly this kind of project. We provide startup funds, business training, and mentoring for veterans with good ideas. Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Are you saying you might fund my fitness center?" "I'm saying I want you to apply as soon as you're ready," Robert said. "Based on what I've seen today and what others have told me about you, I think you're exactly the kind of leader we want to support." He handed Marcus a business card. "Call my office next week. We'll set up a proper meeting to discuss your vision." As Marcus walked home that evening, he thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. From being mocked by Professor Mitchell to being offered a chance to start his dream business, all because he stood up for himself in the right way. What Marcus didn't know was that Professor Mitchell had requested to meet with him. She had something important to say, and their final meeting would surprise everyone. 3 days after the committee meeting, Marcus received an unexpected email. It was from Professor Mitchell, asking if he would meet with her in the dean's office. At first, Marcus wasn't sure if he should go. He talked to Tasha about it. Why would she want to see you? Tasha asked with concern in her voice. I don't know, Marcus replied. But the meeting is in the dean's office, so it should be safe. Marcus decided to go. He believed in giving people a second chance, just as he hoped others would do for him if he made a mistake. The next day, Marcus arrived at the dean's office at the agreed time. Dean Williams was there, sitting behind her desk. Professor Mitchell sat in a chair, looking much older and more tired than Marcus remembered. Thank you for coming, Mr. Johnson, Dean Williams said. Professor Mitchell has something she would like to say to you. Professor Mitchell looked up at Marcus. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. Mr. Johnson, I want to apologize for how I treated you in my class. Marcus sat down across from her, surprised by her sincere tone. The bias training I've been taking has opened my eyes, she continued. I didn't realize how unfair I was being. I made assumptions about you based on stereotypes, not on who you really are or the quality of your work. Marcus listened carefully. He could tell this was hard for her. I've taught for 20 years, Professor Mitchell said. In that time, the world has changed, but I haven't changed with it. When I saw you in my class, a black veteran, older than the other students, I immediately thought you wouldn't belong in college. I was completely wrong. She took a deep breath before continuing. Your paper on Invisible Man was actually one of the best in the class. Your military experience gave you insights that other students didn't have. Instead of valuing that, I punished you for it. Dean Williams spoke up. Professor Mitchell has agreed to write a formal apology that will go in her file. She's also working with Dr. Wilson to create a workshop for faculty on recognizing and addressing bias in the classroom. Marcus nodded. I appreciate your apology, Professor Mitchell. That's all I wanted from the beginning. To be judged by my work, not by who I am or where I came from. Professor Mitchell looked at him with new respect. You handled this situation with more maturity than I did. You could have tried to get me fired, but instead, you focused on making things better for all students. That's what I learned in the Army, Marcus explained. We succeed or fail as a team. Getting you fired wouldn't have fixed the bigger problems. As Marcus left the meeting, he felt a sense of closure. The conversation with Professor Mitchell had ended a difficult chapter in his life. 1 month later, Marcus stood in an empty building near campus. Robert Thompson from Veterans First was with him, along with Tasha, Dr. Wilson, and several other supporters. The sign outside read, Second Chance Fitness, a place for veterans to rebuild. I can't believe this is really happening, Marcus said, looking around at the space that would soon be filled with exercise equipment. 6 months ago, I was just trying to get through Professor Mitchell's class. Robert smiled. Sometimes our biggest challenges lead to our greatest opportunities. Your grant application was approved in record time because you already proved you have what it takes to be a leader. As Marcus cut the ribbon for his new business, he thought about everything that had happened. A teacher had mocked him and tried to make him feel small, but instead of giving up or fighting back with anger, he had responded with dignity and determination. And now he was helping others like himself. The fitness center would be a place where veterans could heal, grow stronger, and find community. And it all started because Marcus refused to be defined by someone else's prejudice. As the first veterans began to sign up for memberships, Marcus knew this was just the beginning of his journey. The same strength that had gotten him through war, through injury, and through discrimination would now help others find their way home.